Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 168 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm your host, Scott Butman, and joining me is my original podcast co-pilot from all the way back in 2019. It's Mr. Derek Marsh. Derek, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Scott? Going good. Just
Oh, I
doing
didn't
a
see
little bit
you
of
there.
painting minis here, trying to figure out as difficult it can be getting into those small little crevice cracks, especially when it comes to clone trooper helmets. Trying a different technique rather than trying to use a paintbrush. Even with the finest paintbrush, it's still very
Mhm.
difficult. So what I'm
Yes.
trying to do specifically at this point is using a black Sharpie, and I'm
Oh,
going to try that out and see how it works, specifically on the helmet. So far, it seems to be kind of good. I know it's kind of difficult to see, but
yes, your potato camera is still doing well.
so
I got it. Yeah. Now,
you,
of course, as an experienced miniatures painter, I began painting miniatures back in 1996. I would say when it comes from me making my own stormtroopers, I've never painted clone troopers, but I have painted stormtroopers for Star Wars Legion.
mhm.
I spray painted them black and then painted the panels white and left the black undercoat.
Yeah,
Now, this takes a little bit more time, and you need multiple coats of white paint.
yeah.
So let me know how your Sharpie method works, because maybe that's better. Of course, there is a guy on our show who has painted a blue million clone troopers, and some of them actually a shade of blue. And that is, of course, our very own Dave Phil Cloney, Mr. Miracle, the gooey, chewy man of 1,000 nicknames. It's Nathan Miracle. Nathan, what is your secret to painting screen accurate clone troopers?
My secret to painting screen accurate clone troopers is patience. Lots and lots of patience. Because I would set up a kind of a factory line of, okay, I'm going to paint these 7 clone troopers, and then these 7 identical clone troopers, and then these 7 identical clone troopers. Because, of course, in Legion, you want multiples of the same types of units. And I wanted to make sure I had 6 sets of the Phase 1 clone troopers before they ever came out with the Phase 2s.
Or the
Yeah.
expansion other ones like the ARCs, the ARFs, the Commandos.
Right, yeah, because I got into Republic, as soon as it came out. So I'm like, I need the whole kit and caboodle. So I painted a lot of mine not screen accurate. My favorites, of course, were the ones that I painted as Perry the Platypus,
Yeah.
because Perry the Platypus was voiced by D. Bradley Baker, who also voices all of the clones.
Yeah.
So if I had kept up with it at this point, I probably would have painted some as Appa too, because he voiced Appa and Momo in Avatar: The Last Airbender as well, which is how he knew Dave Filoni in the first place.
That would be pretty cool if you got it on the helmet, like instead of like the Ahsoka Tano thing, actually did
Yeah.
the symbol on the helmet there.
The thing there, though, is those would be screen accurate because there is a group of arrowheaded clone troopers.
Cool.
I'll have to go back and figure out exactly when and where, but those do exist.
I mean, there's at least 501 versions, so
Oh, there's way more than that.
I know. There's at least 501 that we know.
But yeah, it takes a long time, and honestly, that's part of the reason that I don't play Legion anymore, because I got tired of painting so many just white, and I tried it both ways. I paint them black and then do the panels white, and I start them as white and do the joints as black. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both, because it's really easy to accidentally get some black where it's not supposed to be when you start them off as white.
That's why I'm trying the Sharpie.
Yeah, I can't blame you for trying it.
I like that plan. I think that's a cool plan. But we're not here to talk about Star Wars Legion. We
Or
are here
painting.
to talk
Well,
about
we could.
or painting, to be quite fair. We are here to talk about Star Wars Andor Season 2 and that breathtakingly awesome finale. So this episode of the podcast will be about the final 3 episodes of Star Wars Andor Season 2. So if you somehow haven't watched that yet, don't listen to this episode of the podcast, because spoilers will abound. So let's jump right into it, guys. Indeed, yes. I guess I could play the spoiler alert thing. I
But
haven't played
don't.
it forever.
We're good.
No, I gotta push the button now. I actually have the thing.
Don't push the big red button. Ah!
If you see that big red button, whatever you do, don't press the big red button.
Okay, there we go. Actually, I kind of want to co-opt the Skywalking Through Neverland one that they do because it's a modification of the Jungle Cruise warning sign from Disneyland. And he goes, "Attention Skywalkers, spoilers ahead," which is exactly what you hear on the Jungle Cruise ride when you're about to hit the rapids or rocks or whatever, which I think was just hilarious. Anyways, but yeah, spoilers for Andor season 2 finale episodes. So this episode of the podcast is about those last three. Yeah, let's jump right into it. Derek, what did you like best about these final three episodes of Andor?
I liked it because I mean they miraculously filled everything in 3 episodes for as best as they could. So, um, and let's be honest. I mean, we had him at the end of the episode 9 with K2SO waking up. He's alive, and boy, did he deliver. Alan Tudyk, you could definitely tell.
Yeah.
I love the interviews that they've been doing afterwards with Alan Tudyk and Alan Tudyk and Diego Luna. They seem like, to me, they should get their own cooking show. And I would just watch him. For those that don't get it, that's the joke with Diego Luna. He wants to basically start his own cooking show because now he's done everything that he wanted to do ever in acting, which was Star Wars. Which again, I appreciate him because he is a fan. He shows appreciation. You can obviously tell with the writing that Gilroy gave him. He took it to heart, tried to deliver everything meaningful, and it was just great. I love the action that like I said with Alan Tudyk as K2SO with when they're trying to free Clea, who goes back to the apartment, which we see earlier in the season. Kind of their final hiding place as Luthen's shop finally gets, basically discovered. And yeah, it was just great seeing that interaction, especially with him and Melshi early on when they're playing some type of other game again, because it wasn't Sabak and it wasn't that other game that was ever in Solo that they introduced. I can't remember. But no, it was great seeing that and just everything. And then obviously the opening in episode 10 with Clea just basically going, whether you want to say it's Jason Bourne or Ethan Hawke or Jack Reacher, whatever you want to say. That was just super cool. And I'll be honest, my favorite part though is ET's dimension-ridden grandma. Just that whole thing was great. I just loved her as a decoy, and she's just going along with everything, and just that was just made me laugh and smile so much as we were going through. And it was a nice break because obviously there's a lot of tension going on in that episode, and just having this, like I said, ET's grandma going through. So hopefully, I think that's the reason why ET was trying to phone home, because he needed to talk to grandma. So
that's it. He wanted to be like, "Hey, grandma, I heard you're in the hospital. I wanted you to know I didn't forget about you." Yeah. That's hilarious. So. Yes. All right. I'll jump in next. I was gonna say my favorite part of these episodes was everything with Clea, but Derek kind of got that one as well. So I will say my favorite part of these episodes was the massive urban firefight thing where K2SO is like ultimate secret weapon for the rebels to rescue Clea from Coruscant, where not only does he like kick butt in the actual fighting, but his technical acumen makes it to where the Empire has no comms. He really capitalizes on the ISB's own attempts to like lock everything down. He's like, oh, well, I know what that means, and then he maneuvers their shuttle or their jamming device to change everything, and then shows up and saves the day, which is great because I love that back at ISB HQ. Partygast. Partygast is all, what the heck is going on? Why can't we get anybody over there to, actually arrest these people? And like their own efforts to block comms have messed up their own comms thanks to K2 doing the flippity flippity whatever. And I'm just like, this is the perfect microcosm of imperial ineptitude. And I love how Partygast is listening to Nimic's manifesto from season 1 and like slowly coming to that realization of, oh yeah, we're fighting against nature itself by trying to maintain all this control. And then, very, very darkly gives up on the whole shebang. But I enjoyed the scenes where K2SO is saving the day. And I'm so happy that they were able to go back and rescue Clea, because I was worried that once Luthen had passed, that she was doomed, So, Nathan?
I was going to say they should have gotten a flight path.
Yes. Just be like, boop, call a shuttle, get the heck out of there.
Well, you guys have kind of talked about my favorite parts already, because I was going to say almost hypocritically, because in the first set of 3 episodes, I complained about how Cassian didn't do much of anything. And then my favorite of these 3 episodes was the first one where Cassian's not even in it. So what do I actually want? I don't know.
Clea Andor.
Clea Andor, yes. But the spycraft there was excellent. And earlier in this season, I had predicted that somebody was going to have to kill one of their own for operational security purposes, and that finally happened. It wasn't the people that I thought it was going to be, so I'm not going to say that I really got that prediction correct, but that sort of thing happened. So I was happy to see that my idea wasn't totally wasted there. But after you guys talked about that, my second favorite part was K2SO, which you then talked about. So you took them both. But if I were going to put one moment on K2SO, it's the moment that he's walking up and they ask him directly, "Hey, are you with us?" No. Wham! Like, doesn't bother trying to like sneak in or hide the fact that he's not with them. He's not like, "Yes, I am an Imperial droid." Totally. Mm-hmm. No, just nope. I will knock you off the bridge for daring to ask.
I saw somebody talk about how they think K2 is just absolutely savage in this episode because he's bulletproof. Like, blaster bolts have bounced off of him earlier in this very fight, to say nothing of other fights. And he still takes Hurst's body and uses it like a human shield, so that the other ISB agents are blasting Hurst's corpse at this point. And like, just psychological warfare to the nth degree.
Now, I would argue that he's only sort of bulletproof. He's more bullet resistant than proof, because when he dies in Rogue One, spoiler alert, when he dies in Rogue One, it is from blaster fire. So, concentrated blaster fire, lots of blaster fire will wear him down. So he does need to protect himself somewhat. The occasional blaster bolt will just ricochet off. But rather than taking lots of blaster fire, why not use a human shield?
Yeah, who human shield, who himself is wearing blaster resistant armor.
Right.
Yeah, Mita was having fun looking at the body armor suits that Hurst and his squad were using,
ISB
and she's like, the ISB agents, and she's like, "How come they are not wearing their helmets?" I'm like, "Oh, babe, these aren't actually stormtroopers." She's like, "But they have on stormtrooper armor." I'm like, "Technically, this is slightly different than the stormtrooper armor. Most importantly, they have greaves but not leg plates," which I thought was interesting, and I think that's to increase their maneuverability. But whatever. But yeah, I like the fact that we were shown that these were not stormtroopers. These were ISB agents come to arrest somebody. So they're almost like cops wearing SWAT armor, when they raid the wrong apartment. Or in this case, they raid the correct apartment, but, for the wrong reason.
Well, first they went to the wrong apartment.
That is true. They did raid the wrong apartment the first time. They're like, "Wait, no, we got to go upstairs.
We got to go one up."
We have it between 3 floors, 26, 27, 28. So what do? We go to the first floor instead of going to the middle floor.
The most likely is the middle floor, you would think. But but the 501st Legion of cosplayers are going to have a field day with that episode.
Yeah, I was actually happy to see this too, because if I ever decide to do a Imperial cosplay, I could do that and not have to cover my head.
Yeah.
which would be great because those buckets are hot. And as Captain Rex so helpfully informed us, you can't see a thing in these helmets. So
Wait,
anyway.
you're not going to pull up one of the new ones where you have to wear like stilt buckets and you could play K2SO now?
Actually, I really ought to.
Now,
What I really ought to do is cosplay as the cyborg dude with the eye implants that was like at the Senate building when Mon Mothma was giving her speech and he was the comms guy. Because then I could just modify my glasses and have them stay on as part of my cosplay, which would be really, really useful because I am blind as a bat.
Well, and then your niece can play, what's her name from Skeleton Crew?
Oh, there's so many. Oh man, Maddie would have a field day playing.
She could play
the cyborg girl from Skeleton Crew. She'd probably love that actually. Nathan, you were saying?
So speaking of K2SO and cosplays, I talked with Kyle and Kevin on Thursday, and we pointed out Kevin appears a little bit like Alan Tudyk. So I'm hoping that in 2027 at Star Wars Celebration, I can get him to cosplay as Alan Tudyk with the K2SO
with the thing on his head,
the trash can,
as the reference, and I can be Dave Filoni and be like, "You stand over there."
But you need somebody to cosplay as Diego Luna because that's another joke that they had where Diego Luna comes up to Alan Tudyk when they're shooting it, and he's like, "Alan, you need to take this off. Everyone here, the whole crew, thought they were going to be on a big budget, and you're just killing morale here because you look like you got this trash can on your head."
Yeah. Good times. Okay, all right. Let's move on to slightly a bit of a downer, but we still got to be critical. We are critics after all. What did you dislike most about these 3 episodes? And for me, it is, I definitely understand the narrative reasonings and the emotional, dramatic impact of this scene. But I'm adding it to my list of complaints about Andor alongside Bix and her sexual assault scene. I didn't like that Partagast killed himself. I get why he did it. It was very well done, dramatic, tasteful, but I don't want self-harm, and in this case, actual suicide in Star Wars. It's just too heavy. I know that everyone is on a big yay, Andor is great. It's so cool to see a gritty Star Wars. Kind of like we all were back in the day when Rogue One came out almost 10 years ago now, if you could believe that. But back then, I mean, if you look back at my Facebook post about Rogue One, when it first came out, I was talking about how, listen, all of us growing up with Star Wars back in the 80s and 90s and turn of the century, we wanted Star Wars to grow up with us and be dark and gritty. And like all the Dark Horse comics and the Shadows of the Empire stuff was really heading this way. I mean, for goodness sakes, Prince Shizor in Shadow of the Empire used his pheromones to essentially do all kinds of sexual assaults, if you really want to get right down to brass tacks. And that was creepy and icky back then. And I wrote about how Star Wars fans, this is what you said you've wanted. Now that you've got it, is it what made you happy? And the answer, of course, was people loved Rogue One, but then they didn't necessarily love all the rest of the stuff that Disney went on to do. And so I'm always curious as to whether Disney had sort of shot themselves in the foot by taking this tact on Rogue One and now Andor, and then not sticking true to that new atmosphere of darker and grittier stuff. And Partagast's suicide is just another example of that. When we go and we have Star Wars Visions later on this year, and the anime is back to cartoony stuff, and we have something like, I don't know, the new version of Tatooine Rhapsody, very kiddie, cartoony, musical, are fans going to be like, this is garbage. Give me more of, the edgy stuff from Andor. You had such wonderful stuff. Also, is it really what fans still want? Because you hear people talk often about Andor Season 1. We don't know yet for all of Season 2. But Andor Season 1 had major critical acclaim. And lots of fans like us talk about it. And we talk about how great it is for, even non-Star Wars fans can watch this. But streams-wise, they weren't. Season 1 Andor was a critical hit, not exactly as a audience hit as far as total streams and, total ratings, if you will. Ratings is an antiquated term, but you know what I mean. Eyeballs on the screens. So I didn't like that they had Partagast kill himself. I would have been fine if we got right to the part where he pulled that gun out of the drawer and then we cut to something else. But we did now. Granted, we cut to the outside of the room. The stormtroopers with his second in command, and then we hear the blaster bolt and the thud. So it's very clear what happened. And I understand the dramatic reasons for it, but I want this kind of stuff to stay in sci-fi properties like Dune or The Matrix or something like that. Something that's already darker and more adult, hard sci-fi in tone. I like Star Wars to be space fantasy, and this just. I mean, I almost felt like I wasn't watching a Star Wars show anymore, except, of course, that there were two stormtroopers standing there, which makes it very obviously a Star Wars show. And I'm not complaining about the writing. This is very well written. I just don't like this tone in my Star Wars. Same deal with the sexual assault. I understand the whole reasoning that Bix's character went through that, but I don't want to see this in my Space Wizards stories. And if people love it, and obviously they do, that's great. I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to, as Nathan always says, don't yuck someone else's yum. And I'm not going to do that here. But me personally, I didn't like this, and I hope we don't get more suicide in Star Wars. Derek, what you got?
So I will lead off by saying I partially got last week's prediction right, where I did say that Luthen and Deidre were going to meet up and that they were going to kill each other. Well, they didn't kill each other. They killed themselves in some aspect because Luthen stabs himself. And because of Deidre acting in her own whim, she kind of killed herself. Because
she killed her career for sure.
Well, she killed her career, but then she ends up in prison, right? Which at this point, after the escape that Cassian did several years before, that they turned up the, security at these prisons. And basically, she was gonna, they were saying that basically at this point, even if you got off at good terms, you're basically just going right back. So it was a life sentence aspect, which at this point you knew they were because they're assuming she's a rebel spy. So you knew she was going to have a life sentence anyway. So in essence, she was going to kill herself there anyways, right? Whether she at some point, walks off onto the red floor or not. So again, I give myself about half credit because I did slightly predict that, but it wasn't the full, which is the reason why for me, I didn't like that because I get it. It was what would have been a full season had to be done. And we only had it in 3 episodes. And obviously, again, episode 10 is phenomenal with the whole Clea and doing everything she had to do in the hospital. But that was my one gripe, I think, was basically that's the kickoff of the episode is, Luthen and Lenny basically having this conversation, which was again pretty heavy, where he just basically kills Lenny because at this point he knows he's at least compromised. I didn't like that Luthen went back though to the shop and didn't have you would have thought he would have basically had a way to self-destruct that whole building at any point in time. Same thing with his ship. The fact that he actually had to go back and pour whatever that acid or aluminum stuff on it to do it, which he did a poor job of it anyways, because then that was part of the whole reason they were able to figure out. But to me, that was the one thing I was never, unless again, Coruscant has a way of doing these self-scans everywhere where they scan a whole building for explosives. But at the same time, it's but then wouldn't they have been able to pick up the radio frequency at some point doing some weird
things? You would have thought that Luthen had some, super secret explosive that they didn't know about, or he's going to do the quintessential Star Wars version of the terrorist fertilizer bomb. You have all this fertilizer, but who's going to expect that to blow up your museum or your art dealership?
Yeah, to me, I thought he would have just gone back to the ship and literally just drove the ship to blow up the building and then just run off. Because, obviously that's what Cassian was able to do with Mon Mothma, right? Yeah. He rescues her and there's nobody to stop him from leaving. They obviously should have built a giant shield like they did with Scarif at that point, right? There's only really one way out that they could have closed it before anyone even broke through the shield.
Although that if the Empire had tried to institute one of those shields around Coruscant, it would have been an absolute, public relations nightmare. The Senate would have pushed back.
I'm surprised that the Republic didn't have that even back then, especially after. Granted, it happens in Revenge of the Sith when Grievous comes and steals Palpatine. So you thought he would have done that himself, but we can't have this ever happen again.
So the idea of putting a planetary shield around Coruscant was discussed and almost done all the way back in Star Wars: The Old Republic. Of course, I'm going to mention my favorite MMO here. There is an entire subplot. Spoiler alert for 2013, I guess. Anyway, there's an entire subplot as a or a Republic trooper where one of the super weapons that gets developed is a planetary shield. And you would think, but why is that a super weapon? Isn't it a super defense? Well, what happens is the Sith take it and reverse engineer it so they can seal off a planet so that no one can get in or out without permission, and also so that they are trapped there and they just let them starve to death and die. It's like an ultimate planetary siege weapon for the Sith Empire. So the idea of putting it around Coruscant is quickly, they poo-poo that idea and they cancel it, and so they put away the whole idea of a planetary shield and talk about how we should never put this around Coruscant because the bad guys might turn it against us and we'll all starve to death because we can't get food deliveries and all that stuff. So I kind of always tell myself that they didn't do that on Coruscant because of that little Easter egg in the video game.
I get that, but at the same time, could you just dismantle the shield generator at some point from within that it would then?
Oh, you should play the game. There's a whole section about that.
It's been forever since I.
It's great.
I feel like there was one about that early on in the first version. Was it later? One of the expansions that had it. Do you remember?
No, that was in the Prime.
Was that the one with like little the Yoda character gives it off or something, like the second dungeon you have to do or something?
Jedi Master Otug.
Yeah, I remember it.
Who is voiced by the dude in the video game? He's voiced by the guy who did the voice of Winnie the Pooh. So every so often you get the feeling that Cummings is talking as Yoda race Jedi Master Otug, and he's like, suddenly it's all, oh bother, it's great.
Do not, or the honey pot gets it.
That's right.
But anyways, that was
very prolific voice actor. He also,
he's lots of places.
He was Fat Cat in Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
He actually
plays Tigger.
He plays Tigger. He actually voiced Scar in The Lion King, but only in certain sections. Jeremy Irons was the main voice. But when it came time to sing Be Prepared,
singing.
He couldn't do that. I believe he was on vocal rest at that time, actually. So Jim Cummings actually does the song.
Yeah. Wow, well, he also does Pete from the Goofy movie.
Mm-hmm.
He plays Pete. He is Ray from Princess and the Frog. He plays the little lightning bug. He's in DuckTales. I can't remember who he does. I think he does the.
I think he does several people in DuckTales.
He does that. The DuckTales, and then in Tailspin, he plays the dastardly pirate guy, the weasel fox wolf guy.
He often plays bad guys.
Yeah,
weirdly enough.
Well, I mean, he's done Pooh and Tigger forever, so he probably likes the variety of stuff, right? So, but anyways, and then but anyways, that was my main complaint, was basically just the way it led up to it. Like, to me, I the fact that Deidre and Luthen right at the beginning, and then Luthen didn't have anything, to basically like set up for that, like, and he kind of just walks himself into it. It's kind of like, really? Like, okay, like I thought it would have been more like he would have had to go and actually like do something, like rescue Clea or do something to get the Death Star plans, and then that would have walked him into the trap, not just literally going back to his shop after Lenny just told him like they're on to us, you know what I'm saying, and then not having anything to basically compensate. Like, wouldn't he been better off because what was weird too is that like they didn't even think about like Clea being the associate for him forever, that she was also part of the Rebel Alliance until it was too late. I'm like, how did you guys not know? Like, as soon as you go after Luthen, you should have been going after Clea, and that was, well, again, that was Deidre being Deidre at this point, the way they, like, that was part of the thing too. At the end was like, they really made Deidre, which we missed that whole year in between. Like, it just seemed like they made her really dumb. Like, she did some stupid stuff just because she was so anxious of getting access at this point that she just did some silly loophole things. But anyways, that was it. Just that little interaction at the end, or because it was so early and we missed that, like how they got to that point, I guess.
Well, she always assumes that her first assumption is right, and her overconfidence is her weakness. I'm sure that doesn't ever come up ever again for any other characters.
I really thought you were going to make a Les Miserables reference here with Javert and Jean Valjean about how she won't give up and makes dumb decisions while she's completely obsessed with, her target.
That's probably intentional, actually, given how much how much of the Gorman massacre really felt like it was lifted from Les Mis.
Very French. Yeah.
Very, very French.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen people put the song from Les Mis over top the Gormans.
Cassian and Cyril and Deidre all singing. That'd be hilarious.
Well, I mean,
What is this? Strange New Worlds?
Star Wars musical. I'm in. Let's do it. Let's put it on Broadway, man. Come on.
All they did was they took the portions where the Gorm are singing and put the "Do You Hear the People Sing" song over top of it. They didn't modify it in any way.
We
other than
already
just
have
soundtrack.
We already have the super portable, completely rearrangeable barricades that we've seen both in Imperial Assault. Imperial Assault, Star Wars Legion, and on that episode. So we can easily do a stage show where we rebuild, tear down, turn around, flip over the barricade.
I'm not sure if they timed it for this specifically or if it just worked out this way, but when they got to the lyric of "Is there a world you long to see beyond the barricade?" that scene had the barricade, like they were putting the barricades
Perfect.
out.
Perfect.
I don't
kiss, no notes, etc.
I don't know if they keyed it to we're going to make sure this lines up and then had everything else fall into place based on that, or if they just got lucky. But
I think it just speaks volumes to the fact that it writes itself, that they probably didn't have to try. It just did it on its own. Anyways, we're getting way off track for question 2. Nathan, what did you dislike about these episodes? Not enough Les Mis.
That's right. Not enough Les Mis. Actually, my biggest dislike was the entirety of the 3rd episode, and it had one particular problem, the prequel problem. I lost some interest because I knew exactly where all of this was going. There were several conversations that were supposed to be very tense with the rebel leadership. Oh gosh, what are they going to do with Cassian? I don't know. Probably send him to Kafrine. just a hunch.
What is Cassian going to do about Tivik? I don't know. Probably shoot him.
Yeah, probably so. I think I have some ideas of what
that didn't make
next.
any sense though, because technically this was still a year out before that was supposed to happen.
No. This was one BBY, but one BBY goes up until the Battle of Yavin.
Don't we have 13 months worth of years in a Star Wars year anyway, right?
But all I'm saying though, if it's one BBY, the Battle of Yavin is 0 BBY. So that would be even if it's 12 months, whatever months you have. But this wasn't Chi minus 10 days.
Yes, it was.
But it doesn't specifically say that, is what I'm saying.
It doesn't specifically say that, but that's what it is. It's kind of like if you had something set in our world, it was 2024, but it's December 28th of.
That's what I'm saying. To me, I would have preferred that. It would have been one BBY, because it says 1 year later, one BBY, negative 10 days or something like that, just so you would have known, because that's where I felt okay, so is this literally days before, or is it still months before? And
I get where you're coming from, Derek, but it's so hard to write like that in Star Wars because of the way that hyperspeed works.
I get that, but as I say, but anyways, go ahead.
Regardless, that is not my complaint. My complaint is I know what's going to happen in Rogue One, so I know what the results of these things that are supposed to be tense is going to be, so they're not tense for me. It goes back to the old, how do you create tension in a scene where you have a cafe and there's a bomb underneath the table? The audience needs to know that there is a bomb and that the people there don't know it, but they have to not know when it's going to go off. I know when the bomb is going to go off. Therefore, it's not tense for me. So I would like to get somebody who hasn't seen Rogue One and have them watch Andor first and get their reactions to, what do you think is going to happen? But I don't really know anybody who hasn't watched Rogue One.
Yeah, it was so ubiquitous among Star Wars fans. I guess someday in the far future, although I'm not even sure if this is going to happen, when I decide to show Maddie, Andor and Rogue One, I'm not going to show her anytime before high school, that's for sure. And she's only currently 11, so But
so bring that question up in about 6-7 years, Nathan.
That's right. Yes. Once we get to What a Piece of Junk episode 1027, then we can episode 1138. Then we can talk about what happens if you watch Andor and you've never seen Rogue One. Anyways, I agree with you completely, though, Nathan. I had the same feeling about lack of dramatic tension during the big firefight on Coruscant, because not only do we know that Cassian survives, we know K2SO survives, and we know that Melshi survives because Melshi is in Rogue One as part of the strike team that goes to Scarif. The only person that might not survive was Clea, and then you're kind of like, well, what would be the point of all this? I guess maybe just to give us a little more pathos to watch her die. But I kind of felt like that sealed the deal that, well, they're going to make it out somehow, and neither Cassian, Melshi, nor K2 are going to die.
Well, that's true, but see, that's where I actually thought that they weren't going to be able to rescue her, because she was going to say, "I'm going to stay," or something was going to happen to that point where they basically, like, Melshi and Cassian have to drag K2SO out. But obviously, we got the great action scene that we did, and that she was basically going to sacrifice herself to get Cassian out.
I was just thinking, Derek, you were mentioning. Oh, sorry, Nathan, go ahead. I'll hold mine for a second.
But to me, the question of what did you like about these three episodes is not the second episode where they're trying to get Clea out. It's the third episode where the Rebel Council is trying to decide what to do, and like everything in that third episode is just clearly setting up Rogue One. But since I already know how Rogue One goes, I'm like, well, of course this setup is happening.
Yeah. I was going to say Derek's complaint about, I didn't like this part about Luthen having no, backup plan, basically. I just realized that Luthen essentially commits suicide in this triplet as well. I'm like, dude, come on. I don't need all this. Anyway, but, at least Obi-Wan dying in A New Hope is a noble sacrifice at the hands of Darth Vader. Yes, he gave up, but he didn't take the lightsaber and stab himself. It's like there's a difference. You know what I mean? Like, Vader could have... Yeah. Vader could have had an attack of conscience for his old master. I mean, obviously, at that time that it was written, we didn't know that was how that was going to go.
We didn't know it was going to be this big.
The point is, it was a very much, a different thing that Obi-Wan was doing. But I do also get that Luthen's move was more self-sacrifice for a noble reason, much more so than Partagast. His self-sacrifice was not exactly noble. It was more... attack of conscience or / absolute fear. The only way out.
It's crazy to think he'd rather die than deal with what the Emperor was going to do to him.
Well, he knows I don't think that's
crazy.
Well, I'm just saying, so he'd rather shoot himself than by lightning.
Exactly, or whatever. Their very long list of ways to die by torture. The horrible sound,
or not die.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Anyways, all right.
But it was so weird because I'm like trying to think too. Like, what did I mean? Usually everybody gets one redo. Like somebody screws up and somebody gets one redo. So I want to know what Partagast's one screw up was, because he wasn't getting a second redo.
Yeah.
No. People don't necessarily get one redo.
I think
Ozzel got like 20 redos. So come on.
I was about to say, I think Vader's the only one who actually does give him redos, because he not only did he give Ozzel more than one chance, but later he gave Admiral Piet more than one chance.
When he gave Nita as well. No, Nita loses the Millennium Falcon,
and then immediately gets killed.
Yeah, I don't think Nita got a second chance. I don't think he ever talked to Vader before.
And Ozzel, we only see him mess up one thing. I mean, we kind of
but Vader says, doesn't Vader say?
Yeah, he says you screwed up for the last time.
You have failed me for the last time. Also, the first time.
Also, the first time.
You failed me once. That's enough.
I'm just saying. I feel like everybody gets one chance. So.
And at the end, he Vader is so distracted by losing the Falcon that he forgets to kill anybody. If you watch Piet's face at the end of Empire Strikes Back, he's expecting to die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then he gets promoted.
Well, this is after he's been promoted, right? Or I guess
Yeah,
he gets promoted between Empire and Jedi.
Yeah, because he gets promoted to captain, and then
he got promoted to admiral because
he's an admiral in return, but I don't remember what he is.
Because Nita was, also was an admiral. Nita then took his place.
Captain.
Would have been an admiral. Yeah. So,
yeah, they never made him a card. It just says Captain Nita on it.
Yeah. Anyways, the point being, I actually think I've seen an essay about a whole thing about how because there's vestiges of Anakin still in him, Vader's the one Imperial that actually gives second chances, whereas other people just blast you or throw you out the airlock or whatnot. I'll have to look that up. Anyway,
well, he is the one who speaks an American accent.
That's true.
The rest of them but I mean, Lucas has claimed that that's on purpose.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not in A New Hope is another question, but
that's the reason it's on purpose, is because we did it in A New Hope and realized, now we got to keep going. Let's just keep going with it all the way through to Rey Skywalker, because she speaks with that British accent because, that's right. Yeah. She started from the bad guy bloodline. Yep. Anyway. See, because when you fight with a katana, it's like a fingerprint of your whole. Okay, I'm going to stop. This is not what this podcast is about.
Please do.
We're going to get to question 3.
So you've already started on question number 3. What are the connections you drew?
There you go. That was
the
mine.
rest of the Star Wars galaxy.
People, it doesn't forget.
Yeah. Well, obviously we've got. I'll go first. Obviously, we've got tons of stormtroopers bopping around. Although with Andor, by this point, that's not that big of a surprise. We did get to see Director Krennic covering his tracks for the Death Star project. I loved that scene where Krennic interrogates Dedra. And I recently read a tidbit of behind-the-scenes info that Krennic putting his finger on top of her head was ad-libbed and was not a direction thing in the script. That Mendelsohn and Dedra's actor did that together on the spur of the moment. So when she makes that face of, oh my God, I'm going to die, that's really what she was thinking, because she was not expecting him to touch her in any way, which is really cool. And he makes her say the word Death Star, although it did bug me that Krennic goes, say the word, and she goes, Death Star. And I'm like, even in the captions, that's 2 words, you guys. Yeah. You are British actors. You're supposed to be lecturing all of us Yankees about how we mutilate the Queen's English. And now
it should have been Stardust.
2 words.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Should have been Stardust.
Yeah, should have been Stardust. But otherwise, I loved that whole thing, and kind of a self-referential moment for Andor season 1 in this episode, or in this triplet. When at the end we see Dedra in a prison cell. It's exactly the same as a prison cell like the one on Narkina 5, even though we're pretty sure that all that stuff got shut down because they damaged the base and a bunch of them escaped and all that stuff.
I really wish we would have seen somewhere like Cassian would have marked his cell and that she would have ended up in his cell.
Oh, but that's what I'm saying. I don't think anybody's on Narkina 5 anymore. I thought that prison was done for because they blew up stuff and escaped and everything.
Well, they just had to turn the power back on, which takes months, they said, but that would really be it. I don't think the Empire would just waste a facility. They're not going to do an Alcatraz here, but maybe they will.
I don't know. Well, first off, Alcatraz was really expensive to run, so.
Hey, but we're bringing it back. We're gonna. All right, I'm not gonna.
That's neither here. That's neither here nor there. But the Empire be wasteful more likely than you think. They are often wasteful.
Absolutely. And my last connection, which was also doubles as a mea culpa. Several episodes of the podcast ago, you guys were talking about the ore that they were extracting to make glass from Gorman, and y'all were like, because they need it for the Death Star. And I was all, no, this is for the Emperor's Energy Project. Director Krennic was very clear about that. And then this episode, he was all like, nah, it's a total lie. The Emperor's Energy Project is the Death Star. And I'm like, you rat bastards.
That's what I was trying to tell you at the time.
Hook, line, and sinker. I'm like, but he said the thing. Well, of course, but he lies all the time. Right. Yes, indeed.
It was about ultimate power. It just wasn't,
Not that
electricity
kind of
power.
energy.
Unlimited
Right, yeah.
power.
Exactly. The Emperor's Power Energy Project is all about this big green glowing energy of doom. So anyway,
It's green energy
it's
that
totally it's a
destroys
green energy
planets.
project. That's right. It destroys planets, just not ours. All right. At least not yet. No, that's not true.
Deplanetization.
Even even Coruscant survives in the sequel trilogy. It's Hosnian Prime that gets blown up by the Starkiller base. The
Right.
solar powered energy project, like literally consumes stars. Anyway, all right, Nathan, what connections did you draw to the rest of the Star Wars universe?
All right. Well, I kind of already answered this with what was my least favorite part of these episodes, because the entirety of the third episode is
Cameo
I
after
mean,
cameo after.
yeah, it's just okay. And here's how we're tying this to Rogue One.
Or New Hope, right? So
Yeah. Mostly Rogue One, but a little bit of New Hope too. Yeah.
I did like Bale saying, "I want to go down swinging," and you're like, "Well, I got good news / bad news for you, brother."
Yeah. Yeah.
But do we know for sure though, because he's on Yavin, that he wasn't like in the middle of like trying to get to Alderaan, and for some reason he just couldn't quite land, and as Alderaan blew up, he was shuttled, like just blew up with it, and then he's lost.
I see what you're saying,
and gets amnesia, and
I'm going
okay. That last part is what you need to make it all work.
But even then, I'm pretty sure the intention is supposed to be he's going back to Alderaan to tell Leia to go get Obi-Wan. So the fact that Leia shows up means that he made it back to Alderaan.
Yeah, I also think, Derek, if that was the plan, was the whole actually Bale survived because he was off-world, we would have known about it already in a Star Wars Marvel comic, because they have done almost every single hour between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and they've gotten almost to the point where they've tracked every single hour between between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. So yeah. I don't think Bale's alive.
Because we obviously know Bale is in Rogue One, so he's there. But then it's at some point after they go and attack Scarif that he leaves Yavin and goes to Alderaan.
Isn't there a scene in Rogue One where he was like, "I'm going back to Alderaan to do thus and such. Meet up with you guys later."
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we know that he's going back at that point, and like you said, probably to Nathan's point. Well, at that point though, Leia's already in battle at Scarif though, so he hasn't seen Leia at that point. Because
I'll have to go back and double check the timing on that. I thought he went back prior to the Battle of Scarif.
No, because he's there when. Well, it depends. Yeah, I have to see, because there's two parts when the council is there, right? So you have the council when.
But we don't see the council after the Battle of Scarif, because the movie ends with Vader's rampage down the hallway.
Correct, but I'm just saying. But there's two parts with the council. When they're talking about going to get Galen, and then the other one is when they come back from that, and then basically Jyn does her whole speech, and nobody believes her. But I don't know if Bale was there at that time. He was at the original when they're talking about Galen, but then I don't remember. To Nathan's point, he might have already said that comment. And said he's going back, or was it after before Jyn and Cassian steal Rogue One, basically? I don't remember that. That's what we have to find out. But either way, the timing of it would be real close, that he would go back, have a chance to see Leia or not, to tell her to go get Obi-Wan, and because she's basically at the Battle of Scarif. For whatever reason, she's there.
Yeah, like I said last episode of the podcast when we were talking about could Bale survive? I'd be really surprised. But then again, in some Star Wars Marvel comics over the past 5 years, Padme's handmaidens have survived to the point that Anakin has become Vader, and the handmaidens are working together to try and assassinate Vader. And I'm just like, I never would have expected this to happen, because I kind of got the impression that all the handmaidens were dead or disbanded or whatever, after Padme herself had died. But instead they were like, secret society, we blame Darth Vader for killing
the Red Room.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it made for some interesting comics, don't get me wrong. And that's the kind of thing that could make me see a Bail Organa limited series coming this summer from Star Wars, Marvel Comics. And I'd be like, this is crazy. Let me pre order it.
Okay, so I have found it. The portion where he is talking about getting Leia to go
Go to
get
Alderaan. Yep.
Obi-Wan is at timestamp 1 hour 23 minutes and 31 seconds to be precise. The very next scene is Rogue One showing up to Scarif.
Okay. So it's
So he had time to get back to Alderaan to talk to Leia, because that's before they get down there to sneak into the base or anything like that.
that's assuming that light speed is quick in this one, which we still haven't quite 100% verified.
Light
it
speed
depends
moves at the speed of plot.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
like-
So we don't know. So in theory, Scott's right. Like he could be just approaching and saying,
In theory, maybe the her he was talking about wasn't Leia at all,
Maybe it was
and
Clea.
he was going to get a Night Sister from Dathomir. If we want to just make stuff up, yeah, he could be anywhere in the galaxy.
Or the
But-
the blonde girl that is Leia's bodyguard throughout A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back era, who's
Winter.
been in plenty of Star Wars. Yeah, Winter. Thank you. Who's been in plenty of Star Wars Marvel comics.
Yeah.
No, actually, I think I'm thinking of somebody else. Go on.
No, it's
Nathan.
winter. It's winter. Yeah.
But my point is, the narrative intent is pretty certainly he's going back to Alderaan to tell Leia to go get Obi-Wan.
But see, she's in the Tantive 4, which is on the Purity. So there's a good chance that they could have just docked somewhere outside in Alderaan. He may never actually landed.
But you're just making stuff up.
I'm just saying they're making stuff up that they could easily make it a plot point that he still survives.
I mean, isn't it all made up in the end? I know, but
I was about to be like, Nathan, this is all made up.
I just tried to agitate you on this one, Nathan. Just to say, whatever. No, yes, a 99.99%. I believe you. Yes.
But my point is, I would consider it a retcon for them to, at this point, say, no, he wasn't on Alderaan.
He's Kiari Mundi.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they've never done retcons. They could. It's just, if they do, I'm going to get on this podcast and say, yeah, this is a retcon.
All right. Anything else, guys, on question 3?
No.
All right.
No. All right, question 4. Take it away, you guys.
All right. I put this question, and this is a question that I had when watching the episodes, and I posed to you guys in our chat, and then I thought, well, hold on. Why am I wasting all of this discussion topic here when I could just have it on the podcast? Who forwarded the information to Dedra? That's what I want to know. That is a question that is not answered in these episodes. So the three of us each had different ideas on this. So Derek, let's start with you. What was your idea?
Well, basically, it's part of my gripe of question number 2, right? They basically make Dedra an idiot, and she goes through it, and basically she was somehow, not the only idiot, that some other idiot basically gave her too much paperwork, got the files mixed up, threw it on her desk, and, she didn't turn them in like she said she should have when Krennic was interviewing her. So I look at it that, and it goes back to the earlier of the season when basically Lenny, as the double agent, sticks up for the other guy. I can't remember whatever the ISB agent when Krennic's in there, or not Krennic, Paragast is interviewing everyone, and he's saying we're drowning in too much information. Well, at this point, 2 years later, they're probably doing the same thing where they're still drowning in too much information. They don't know what they're doing, and people are just making stupid mistakes, just like people at the office do all the time. So I'm going to go with that it was still done by accident, as Deidre said, and she took full advantage of it because, like I said, she decided to, obviously she was so obsessed with Axis that she was breaking, HR issues, and that's why she basically got fired.
All right. Well, so you're saying it was legitimately just someone accidentally forwarded the information to her. Scott, you had a little bit different take.
Yeah, no, it was not an accident at all. Dedra is completely and totally obsessed with getting access, especially even more so at this point in time after the death of her somewhat boyfriend lover Cyril. She has nothing left in her life except for her career, and to her, she's got to make or break her career by catching access. She's known who it is all along. If only the rest of ISB would just believe her, what the heck are they all wasting their time on except helping me pursue access, the key to the rebellion itself? Let me just go look and see what they're all working on. And so she goes and combination of trying to dig up more information about Axis and also, like I just said, dig up what could possibly be more important than this. And that's when she discovers the entirety of Project Stardust and all of that stuff. And so she knows way too much about the Death Star. And she doesn't tell anybody because, like all good ISB agents or agents of any fascist regime, the ends justify the means. Because once you decide that you can start using horrible tactics and incredibly duplicitous nature amongst yourself and your enemies, it's a short trip down logical lane to start using those things against your friends too, as long as you're doing it in pursuit of whatever the ultimate goal is that you have convinced yourself is way more important than anything else, up to and including your own humanity. So she sells out herself, gives up her soul by being filled with lies and distrust and duplicitousness, and then goes and digs up stuff about the Death Star, stuff she's never supposed to know, and then she pays the almost ultimate price. We don't see her die, but yeah, she pays the price for being way too nosy because she's so myopically focused with her macro binoculars that have the one lens instead of two on her target, and that being Axis. Anything else is ancillary, up to and including the Death Star itself.
And go ahead, Nathan. If you're going to comment on Scott's stuff.
No, I was just going to say that. So Derek says it was a legitimate accident. Some random person just typed in Dedra instead of Dude
Director.
Man.
Instead of
Director's credit.
Dedra instead of Dejbree.
Yep.
I sent it to 2 tubes and I should have sent it to 1 tube. That's my bad.
But I was going to say, Nathan, before you jump in though, for Scott's point, see, that's where you had a really good explanation, Scott, because what I really wish would have happened of why it sucks that we missed a full season a full season of these last 3 episodes, because that would have been really cool to get like a couple of episodes at the beginning of the season where you have Dedra doing these things, right? Like, and behind the closed doors, she has the whole portraits of all this stuff, and there's a big question mark leading to access, but then yet she has like this picture of Cyril, right? And she's doing all this for Cyril and all this kind of stuff, which you would have seen her spiral down this mad hole of doing all these things she shouldn't be doing, because like you said, she's lost Cyril, she's gone mad in essence, and she's hiding that because she needs to find access, because that's how she can get revenge for the death of Cyril.
Yeah, it's absolutely when you set out on a path of revenge, dig 2 graves.
Okay, so Derek is saying that it was an accident. Scott, you're saying that it's not an accident, but that she went and sought out this information. So the whole "it was forwarded to me" was a lie. I have a third theory, and that is it was Galen Urso or somebody working on Galen Urso's behalf. That it was actually intentional that we accidentally sent these plans to the wrong person, because the more people they can accidentally send these to, the more likely it is that they will actually accidentally get leaked to the people who need to know. Because Galen can't just go tell Luthen himself, and he doesn't know who in the ISB is the actual informant. So if we just go for people that we think are a little overzealous, shall we say, then that might cause a security breach. So I think he's probably had the plans accidentally forwarded to several people.
I mean, the more people... Go ahead, Scott.
There might be some kind of chat where they're discussing the Death Star plans and accidentally reveal it to particular people in the group chat that shouldn't even be on that app.
Yeah, they just send the signal somewhere it's not supposed to be.
They send the signal. Nicely done. I find this hard to believe. I mean, that would never happen in real life.
At least not twice.
Send the signal. Nicely done, Nathan. Nicely done. You can't stop the signal. All right.
Well, I was going to say, or that the fact is that if Galen's doing it, he's like, well, at some point, there's going to be all these people that know about the Death Star or Stardust, and the Empire is just going to start killing its own people because they don't want people to know it. So, like, hey, I'll just start killing them from within, right?
Whoops, the whole ISB knows. Oh, well.
They'll have to just dismantle it in now. So,
yep. All right. Question number 5.
Yeah. So there was an interview done recently where the idea of all of our characters that we have, and to even go back to Nathan's number 2 question of what he disliked about it, because there's obviously going to lead up to the end of the season leading into Rogue One. So, you know, we were guessing basically of who was going to survive and who wasn't, because to be fair, there's a lot of people that were in the series that are not in Rogue One and or not in A New Hope. But basically through that interview, he said, you know, there's a lot of things that some of these characters survived from the series. Obviously, they could be doing all sorts of different things. He didn't really confirm what they're doing at the end of the season 2 of Andor, and what they're doing further on. So basically, my question, you know, is going to be, it's kind of a 2-parter for each of them, though. But so, like, what role do you think, like, Clea, Vel, Wilmon, others are going to have with the Rebel Alliance or even Empire for someone that was survived from, a couple of the ISB agents or something like that from the Empire going forward? And then basically, you know, if you, once you answer that, you know, would you like any of them as a thought of a future spinoff where those characters are involved? When and where would you like that, you know, that series to take place? Would you like, you know, again, if they're going to be post Andor, so even in, you know, post Rogue One essentially too, but what would you like one or more of those characters to be doing in a series if you wanted them? So, all right.
Nathan, what do you got?
I'll start off. Yeah, I definitely noticed that several of these characters survived, particularly ones I weren't expecting to survive. Those who have listened to this show routinely know that I keep predicting that Wilmon would be blown up trying to get Rhydonium. So I'm going to say, since he wasn't blown up trying to get Rhydonium in this series, I want a comic where he gets blown up trying to get some Rhydonium. My golly.
I demand my exploding Wilmon.
It's got to happen. They set it up too well for him to be the fuel that burns for the rebellion, for it to not actually happen. So, yeah, I want that to happen. But I think the most likely place for these characters to show back up would be comics. They can use comics to fill in gaps in what's happening between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, we know a lot of what happens during that time period, but it's a big galaxy. They can just be doing something we didn't know about that still helps the rebellion in some way. And I think the comics would be a good place for that. I don't think we necessarily need a whole new show, because at that point you've got a show that you need to have watched another show and another movie to understand that show. When you get into needing to know that much information, comics is a good place to explore that.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with that idea about comics, not least which because I love comics. So my answer is I'm going to go through the specific people that you mentioned in your question, Derek. As far as Vel is concerned, I think she becomes a personal bodyguard for Mon Mothma. We all know at this point how important Mon Mothma is for the rebellion's genesis, but also for its continued, if you will, legitimacy by having her and Bail Organa and several other senators, former senators, really support it and back it. And Vel is an excellent fighter. And they're related. So these are all perfect reasons for her to become basically a bodyguard for Mon Mothma. I think that's what she does. Wilmon, I believe, is right off screen in A New Hope. in the hangar bay scene in Yavin 4, where Dude Man with epic white guy curly fro is adjusting the fuel cells for a particular Y Wing or X Wing. He's some rebel engineer, right? Right behind him, Wilmon is doing the same thing for some other X Wing. At first, I thought maybe he would be hanging out with Saw on Jeddah and he gets killed in Rogue One. But then, he's not with Saw when we saw Wilmon last. He's on Yavin 4. So he obviously knows where the base is. He's good with fuel. He's good with resources, engineering, starships, etc. So I think he's just, another rebel tech that's helping get X-Wings and Y-Wings ready to go blow up the Death Star, which would be cool. And then with regard to Clea, her amazing skills in covert communications and just communications in general means that she joins the Signal Corps for the Rebel Alliance. But because her identity is so well known amongst them, and as we know, some people are not keen on Luthen and his methods, she needs to change her name. So she has a new alias, Torin Farr. And she is the young woman on Echo Base that is all standby, ion control, fire, get to your ships, evacuate the base. Torin Farr is an alias for Clea, that's my new headcanon. So when we see her in Empire Strikes Back, same girl, now grown up a little bit, that used to help Luthen do his thing. Derek, what's your own answer to your question?
Well, obviously I'll hit Clea first since you did that. So I'm hoping that she'll end up in a series that is at some point going to happen, live action, that they're going to redo it and they'll have all the characters come in, that we want to recast the original, and we'll finally get a Shadows of the Empire, and she's going to somehow be involved into that, and actually introduce her in Shadows of the Empire, or reintroduce her in that series. And maybe, that's where she goes into the underground, world. And that's where we get Prince Zizor and all that stuff with that. So I'm surprised neither of you mentioned Cassian's kid, that they would be. So I think,
curious as to how what happens to Cassian's kid. Yeah.
I think that'll be Ryan Gosling's Starfighter character.
Oh, that would be cool.
So, I mean, even though Ryan Gosling looks nothing of Hispanic,
it's a galaxy far, far away. Luke and Leia don't really look like twins either, other than both being short.
Hopefully they don't die. Hopefully, I know Ryan's always comes out and plays. Usually seems like he plays a character with blonde hair, so maybe they'll actually dye it brown. But if they do that, then I think he'll be Cassian's kid.
That's kind of cool. I was so happy you didn't say that we're going to retcon that to have Cassian and Bixby Poe Dameron's mom and dad, because I'm like, we already have Poe Dameron's mom and dad. Anyway, but
that would be a major retcon of specific information. Like the Bail Organa thing would be a retcon, in my opinion, for implied facts. That would be a retcon of actual stated facts.
Yeah,
especially since it's one thing movie.
Yeah, one thing that we didn't discuss, you guys, and I'm hoping that I should have done this as a question 5. This is question 5B. The fight scene in the flashback that we have where Sergeant Lear, Luthen Rael, is fighting with some people as a pilot on a gunship. Mm-hmm. What was that? Which battle was this? Because it wasn't the Clone Wars, I don't think. Was it some sort of imperial subjugation of a planet? And if so, when was this happening?
That was at the same time that Solo was going on.
Okay. Yeah. So the same as the battles on Minban.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of them are wearing Mud Trooper armor.
Yeah.
So it may actually have been Minban itself.
That's what I'm saying. It's literally the same planet.
Okay.
Wherever Solo's doing his thing.
It's not confirmed as Minban, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility. That one I would not say is a retcon if they come out with that.
I would have to say I never have really gotten much of an idea that there was a whole lot of imperial fighting to subjugate planets after the Clone War. But I guess we had at least a few years of that. I think that's.
And then we had Gorman.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously this wasn't on Gorman. But you're right. The people on Gorman were protesting something. I guess I always thought that when Tarkin landed the starship on those protesters, they had been protesting a particular imperial program, not protesting the Empire in and of itself. Now on Ferrix, obviously they were protesting the Empire in and of itself, but that was way after Luthen had become Luthen. You know, if his name was Lear, which is Rael backwards, I wonder if his first name was some kind of weird backwards version of Luthen.
Nathal, Nathu,
Nethil?
or Natul, I guess.
He may have kept the th together.
Yeah,
It could be Nethul.
yeah. But a very Star Wars move of, I know, I'll be a spy and change my name to my other name backwards.
It's better
No
than
one
keeping the
will
chosen one with
ever-
the same last name as Skywalker.
Yes, we will cleverly hide the son of Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
On the planet that he dislikes the most.
When we have a name, we could just call him Luke Lars and tell him, this is your aunt and uncle on the uncle side.
Yep. Yeah. Anyways, all right. Well, before we finish up tonight's episode, we do have a second segment, as it were, from an article from our friends over at ScreenRant.com. That's a listicle. That's the 10 ways Andor, as a series, changes the Star Wars original trilogy. Now, clearly, we learned a whole lot about the stuff happening before A New Hope, back when Star Wars Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, came out in theaters. We got a new aspect, if you will, of Darth Vader's personality. We learned how did the rebels get the Death Star plans. We took basically the first paragraph of the opening crawl of A New Hope and expanded it out into an epic 2-hour movie, which was cool. And Andor, the series, continues this tradition of expanding out the idea of the nascent rebellion, how they all work together, so on and so forth. But it definitely changes the way that some of us who have been Star Wars fans for the majority of our lives think about A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So the original trilogy is slightly different, more expanded, and doesn't happen exactly the way that we had envisioned nowadays, thanks to the stuff we've learned through Andor. So we'll go over this list real quick for tonight's episode of the podcast. The number 10 way, so this is counting down 10 through 1, the Empire is far more terrifying. Andor shows how the Empire made everyday people suffer. This is definitely true for me. Looking at the way the Empire treated everyday people, I had often assumed that Vader and company were torturing known rebels, but watching Bix get tortured by that auditory sound, watching the massacre on Gorman at the site of a monument to a previous massacre? Come on, guys. This is like salt into 18 wounds, not just one wound, or 500 wounds if you want to talk about all the people that Tarkin landed his starship on. So yeah, the show conveys how the Empire makes normal people suffer and how it spreads tyranny to every aspect of daily life. What do you guys think? Point number 10 here. The Empire is far more terrifying.
I mean,
Jared?
basically, I mean, we see it basically continuing from where I feel like we left off in, what Palp was doing. Obviously, a lot of us have read different novels, so they've kind of continued that theme. But we knew it was a very oppressive, entity or government, and you see that, right? I mean, the fact that they continue to choke the Senate, they continue to, which is interesting now that you see that Bail and Mon Mothma and everything that happened in the last half of this season of the series here, because then it means even more that after Pout basically does the whole Gorman thing, that year, in that, and then the following year you have everything with or Mon Mothma defects, and obviously inside some between Bail defects because he's sitting on Yavin. Obviously he may still be somewhat playing the sides of it, but obviously him being on Yavin probably means that he did defect from the Senate in a sense. But basically at this point, when Tarkin says the Emperor has dissolved the Senate, you could see why, right? I mean, basically at that point, the whole thing. So, but yeah, I mean, definitely going into the whole Gorman thing played this hugely, because you realize the things that they were doing, to basically corrupt and the political side, especially now that they've taken again, 45 years later, we weren't thinking of this in 77. Well, 48 years later, I guess. But anyways, the whole idea with the media too that they've had in these past several episodes too, playing into more modern times. So it definitely goes to show you all the corruption that the Empire was.
Yeah. Nathan.
So the
speaking of comms, interrupted.
The biggest oppression that we saw in the original trilogy really came with Cloud City, because everything else was, aside for a little bit on Tatooine itself, but even that was just, we're looking for these droids. Everything else was the Empire versus the Rebels. And yes, the Empire is tyrannical, but you kind of understand why they would be fighting Rebels. The only time we really see them come in and say, hey, we're taking over this civilian location is Cloud City. So in that sense, yes, it expands it out to where we see more systems. Leia talks about it, but we don't really see it. The more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. We see the tightening of the grip here. We see the tightening on Gorman that causes other star systems to turn away from the Empire, which kind of leads into the next point. So,
yes. All right. Number 9. The birth of the rebellion makes so much more sense now. A messy and complicated beginning. So we see throughout Rogue One and Andor season 1 and 2 that the different factions of the rebellion didn't always gel so well. I agree with this, especially when we look at the way that Saw and his partisans interact with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa's group. And I think it takes something like the Death Star to really bring together the other groups that are sort of disparate at this point. However, obviously, the Death Star does not bring together Saw Gerrera's group, because Saw is dead by the time that the Death Star is, on the scene and taking actions and doing stuff. Nathan, what do you think about this? Is this a better explanation of the beginning of the Alliance?
Yeah, I'd actually say I'd credit this more to Rogue One than to Andor. It always confused me that the Rebel Alliance was called the Rebel Alliance and not just the Rebellion, because in the original trilogy, it seems like they're one unified thing. And then in Rogue One, we see, no, actually, there's the partisans and there's these and those. And Saul mentions that there's a whole bunch of different factions. We get to see that a little bit more in Andor. It kind of builds upon what Rogue One had, but it definitely makes more sense that they are a rebel alliance of different groups rather than just one solid rebellion.
And that's why, to be fair, I always liked it. If you think about how they've named their squadrons too. So if you think about it, they have, red and yellow, which is our gold. I'm sorry, that are at the Battle of Yavin with the Death Star, but we get blue, right? And we know there's a green, and technically, there's a bunch of others. So those are obviously with those other factions, right? So basically, to your point, it's like in, we've referenced before, like Legend of the Five Rings with Yoritomi's alliance is the same thing. It's just all these little different sub clans and factions, and they form one because at some point they just all get tired of somebody's crap and decide to band together and do that. But at the end of the day, they're basically, it's almost like the same thing as the United States, if you think about it, right? I mean, there's all these little pockets and states, and they come together to form at one point, but they're still kind of ruled by each state government and all that stuff. So
yeah, we still at first.
Yeah, we still have some vestiges of that here in the USA today, because places like North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and so on have counties as their arrangement of their intra-state governments. But places like Pennsylvania, which is a commonwealth, and Louisiana, which has parishes, are not organized in the same way. All the way up the chain to the fact that every state legislature in the United States has bicameral houses of government, except for Nebraska. No, Kansas. Help me, Nathan. Somebody.
One of the cornfields.
Dang it! Why can't I think of it? It's Nebraska. I'm going to go Nebraska. Nebraska
somewhere that direction.
Unicameral. They don't have bicameral legislature. And anyone listening in Nebraska who is all like, yes, we do. That's Kansas. Yeah, moron. Please feel free to send me a message at whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. And I will issue yet another mea culpa on a future episode where I explain this is not a state government podcast. Anyway, all right, number 8. We know how the rebels first found Yavin, a place of rebel infighting that became the headquarters of the rebellion. Now, the writer here at Screen Rant talks about how seeing such brutal infighting between those who should be allies is a fascinating way to introduce the future headquarters of the Rebel Alliance. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't take it to mean that the reason that Yavin is the base is because those groups were fighting there after some rebel groups tried to meet up and got trapped in the jungle. I thought that the rebel base was already there, just, a few hundred meters away, and our inept rebels on Yavin didn't know it. And that was supposed to be a dark joke about if they had just walked a few more hundred yards, if you will, through the jungle, they would have found all their other rebel buddies there on Yavin already. I don't know. Was I wrong, Derek? Is this supposed to be that the reason they used Yavin as the base was because this infighting happened amongst the inept crew from Maya Pei?
Well, that's where I was going with it, that this would eventually be some uncharted moon, because that's why I'm assuming that's called Yavin 4. It's the moon of Yavin, right?
It is the fourth moon of Yavin. You got it. Nailed it. Good job.
So to me, that is the essential reason why they're doing it, because it used to be some type of, again, what built these Aztec pyramids, and it was some culture that's been evaporated and uncharted because they obviously didn't know where they were at. So I'm assuming that, that was part of the reason where once these, whatever group either got away, if they did finally get away and get figured out, it's like, oh, this would make a great place because we didn't know where the heck this was. Or to your point, at some point, in order to get off, they actually had to work together. Right. So
well, the civilization in question is the Masasi civilization. Yeah. Those are the Masasi ruins on Yavin 4. Yeah, which are referenced in the Old Republic, so I won't get on another.
No, you're right. That's where I was. You're right. So, but anyways, so that's the idea, that it's been an undiscovered planet, and that's essentially how they found out. I don't think at that point, when we see that at the first, because again, that's 4 years at the beginning of the season, that Yavin was there at that point, because it sounds like later on that even Luthen and Clea know about Yavin.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they would have even sent them there when they weren't supposed to be there because they crash landed or whatever on a bad mission, whatever it was, I only watched this once. I haven't rewatched it to really intake all those fine details. But that's how I felt like, again, a mission went bad. They crash landed there, happened to be the same place that for whatever reason, Cassian and the previous pilot were supposed to meet for the exchange of this, because again, it was an uncharted place. And that's why they were picking it, because I don't think they would have picked that place to meet up had it been a base already for the Rebel Alliance.
Maybe you're right. Nathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree that I don't think it was a base at that time, but I think they chose it as a meeting place for the same reason it makes for a good base. It's somewhere that nobody knows where it is. And the Empire's not just going to show up there because it's out in the middle of nowhere. So I don't really agree with the list. I don't think this is how the Rebels first found Yavin. I think it just happens to be the same things that make it a good meeting place are the same things that make it a good base. But plus, we have the Masasi temples here, so we don't have to build a big base. And then from outer space, it looks like there's not really anything there because these aren't the Rebels. These are Masasi ruins.
Yeah. Cool. All right, number 7. We're getting a sense of just how evil Tarkin really is. He committed a massacre long before Alderaan. And this is one of the most disturbing parts of the Andor series, was that Tarkin not just, killed a bunch of protesters, but a la Tiananmen Square here in real Earth history, he took a military vehicle and crushed people with it to death as they peacefully protested. In this case, he landed his starship on them. Notably, not a Star Destroyer, I don't think, but just whatever ship he happened to be in at the time. I always felt Tarkin was evil. You don't hire Peter Cushing to play a Boy Scout. And so I thought that George Lucas, as a good student of film history and, of course, Hammer horror films from the 1970s, was like, hey, we should get that Dr. Frankenstein guy to be in charge of this evil base that's like a floating castle of doom with a half-man, artificially created henchman next to him that kind of walks like this every so
And he's
often.
got bolts, but on his belly instead of his neck.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So yeah, I always thought Tarkin was a real bad dude, and this is a great expansion of his evilness. Nathan, what do you think?
Yeah, this is a case of if you have read all the media about him beforehand, you already knew how terrible he was. The idea that he killed 500 protesters is not actually something that originated in Andor. That was already in canon. So it's less of a Andor has made him this much more terrible and more of a it has brought how terrible he already was to the forefront for the more casual audience. So in that respect, yeah, he seems more terrible, but he was always this terrible.
Right. Derek.
Hey, first of all, Peter Cushing does play the good guy in plenty of those Hammer films too, though.
Now that is true. He has been Dr. Van Helsing, although some people like to argue that Van Helsing is not a good guy.
Just because you are a good guy does not mean you are a good guy.
Just because you're a bad guy doesn't mean you are a bad guy. So they're just misunderstood. So yeah, it just goes to continue to show you the downfall of Tarkin. Because you think about it, like him in the Clone Wars, like he was a quote unquote good guy to Nathan's point. And again, a military man, obviously, yeah, if you read the Tarkin novel, you get earlier upbringings or stories of his upbringing and what he had to do to basically get through to where he's at. And then you find out later. And then obviously there's a lot of comics about him, other things that they've done. Obviously we get more history with this media. So we know he's a bad guy, but I mean, again, to me, it's also interesting to really see that downfall of that character.
Yeah, totally. All right, number 6 on this list is one I really enjoy as far as a dramatic point. Alderaan was not the first world destroyed by the Death Star project. Gorman was sacrificed so it could be built. The Empire slowly turned the galaxy against the Gormans and arranged the Gorman massacre that justified them taking over the planet and strip mining it to death. I mean, like the Imperial engineers that were meeting with Krennic to plan about getting all the ore talked about how we could get it as quickly as we need it, but it would lead to total planetary collapse. And so I'm just like, man, this is insane. Also, a really nice nod toward you can destroy a planet by focusing too much on its resources and not its ecosystem. So, somewhere out there in 1990s, Captain Planet is like, I told you guys. Anyway, and so, this is a really good point by the author here at screenrant.com. I should have looked to see what the author's name was before I started this. It's Nathaniel Rourke. So good job, Mr. Rourke. Excellent point here is that by strip mining Gorman, they destroy a whole nother planet to bring about the birth of the Death Star. Really excellent aspect here analyzed. Derek, what do you think about this point?
It's a good point, but I think it's incorrect. I feel Narkina 5 was the first one destroyed before that because of the prisons. Because that's where they were building.
By virtue of the prisons being built there have ruined it for
Well, they already talk about that, right? Because when Cassian and Melshi escape and there's those other alien pirates, they said that the Empire has basically turned what was once a luscious planet into a murky thing, right? So it's something place that they, so to me, and Nathan's shaking his head, so he's already got something in earlier on in the Clone Wars, because we know Palp's been building this since the Clone Wars anyways.
He had Poggle the Lesser working on the plans as the Separatist,
So you could say that they destroyed Geonosa, right?
Well, he did. Geonosis, speaking of Poggle the Lesser, he wiped out the Geonosians during the Clone Wars. They go back to Geonosis, and the Geonosians are all dead, and the Republic is trying to figure out like why and how. And the answer is pretty much Palpatine had them wiped out. So
to cover up the Death Star plans. Yeah.
Right. Which we know that as audience members, but the Republic doesn't know that at the time, and they don't find it out at that time either. But yeah, Geonosis was at least before either Gorman or Narkina 5. But I do agree that Narkina 5 was essentially destroyed for the Death Star. So Alderaan was the first one blown up. But yeah,
Right.
there were definitely other worlds.
Project.
Yes.
That's where they get project.
No, right. Yeah. There were definitely other worlds destroyed in the process of making the Death Star.
Yeah, excellent. All right, number 5, the rebellion was born in the Senate. Mon Mothma's speech was the true beginning of the alliance. Mon Mothma gave a bold speech that proclaimed Emperor Palpatine a monster and a tyrant. I mean, there's hardly any way you could refute this. That has been an important speech for many years, and we saw the first vestiges of this idea in Star Wars Rebels. And of course, Andor Season 2 had to kind of like bend over backwards to accommodate the idea that Gold Squadron rescued Mon Mothma following her speech, and that the speech was broadcast throughout the galaxy. And so they did a pretty good job, I think, of keeping this intact with what we saw in Rebels, especially for the crowd of Star Wars fans who are all rather stupidly saying, I never watched the cartoons. That doesn't count. I'm like, excuse me, sir, it does count. And actually, this is where we found out a lot of these things before they were shown in Andor. So good on Tony Gilroy and his brother for making sure that they keep this as close as they can to the canon already established around Mon Mothma's speech. And I think that Mr. Rourke's article here is 100% correct. The rebellion was born in the Senate, which is a nod to Roman times, because the Senate was often the hotbed of anti-imperial sentiment in the earlier parts of the Roman Empire. Later parts, when it was way more empire than it was republic, well, not so much, because Senate's kind of not really around anymore. Wait a minute, that happens in Star Wars too. So there you go. Derek, what do you think? The rebellion was born in the Senate? Yes, no, maybe? Kinda?
Well. Again, it says it in the subtext of it. They really should. The Rebel Alliance was born in the Senate, because the rebellion was not born. The rebellion was actually born with the Separatists.
I mean, pretty much, yeah.
Because that's basically what happens. Because again, you get that in the deleted stuff and all that stuff. You find out the Separatists were right, essentially,
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Because all that happens is the Galactic Republic turns into the Galactic Empire.
You haven't watched Tales of the Underworld, have you?
I did. So.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did watch it. Yeah. So
I haven't watched it yet, but that's okay. You guys can discuss it. It's fine.
There's one particular point in Asajj Ventress's section where she meets an old separatist who says outright, well, it turns out we were right the whole time. And Asajj tells him, no, everyone was wrong. Like, both sides were wrong.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much true. So
it's true. I feel like the Separatists were just a slight bit more right.
They were less wrong.
Yes.
They were wrong in some of the ways they went about things,
Correct.
but they were right in that the Republic had become corrupt. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's hard to point to here's one specific time that the rebellion itself was born. You could point to Aldhani and say that was the beginning of the rebellion. You could point to Saul's partisans and say, well, that was the beginning of the rebellion.
Luthen was the start of the rebellion.
Yeah, you could point to Luthen and say that was the start of the rebellion. I don't think there's one point that you could really point to and say, this is definitively the thing that started the rebellion. I do agree with Derek. This is the thing that started the alliance.
And to be even fair, I would even critique that, because it's still to Nathan's point, like still there's other factions out there, and they're still kind of arguing and bickering with each other because they have this Senate within the Rebel Alliance, and they can't get anything wrong. To me, really what is actually the true point is the Battle of Scarif, when everybody finally comes together, which, you could say, yes, is going to happen in a couple of days from the end of Andor, but it really wasn't Mon Mothma's speech, which is what this person's crediting to. Again, it brings light to what's going on, and it does finally say, okay, yeah, we probably should work together a little bit better. But to me, again, it's the start of the alliance, not the rebellion. Which, again, it says it in the subtext, but it doesn't say it in the bold phrase sentence.
Well, and this has real world parallels as well, going back to the American Revolution. With all the different states, they didn't all rebel against England at the same time. We like to think of, we have the Declaration of Independence, and that is the moment that we all collectively said, nope, no more. but real history is a lot messier than that.
Hey, here in Mecklenburg County in North Carolina, we have the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence that many historians say happened a year before, if not longer. Then some historians say, no, that didn't really happen. So, it's hit or miss, but definitely there were groups of people throughout the colonies that were thinking about rebelling against England before, after, and during
Before
the
it
whole
was
segment
cool.
Mecklenburg County likes to claim that we were the first ones to declare our independence. But again, whether that's true or not is kind of a messy
Is there
subject.
anyone there that's in history named Mon Mothma?
Speaking of Mon Mothma, point number 4. Mon Mothma has become one of the best Star Wars characters. Not bad for someone who had one scene in the original trilogy. Excellent point here by Mr. Rourke. I agree completely. Mon Mothma's character expansion throughout Andor has really made her fascinating as a character within Star Wars, and dare I say, almost a more mature representation of what a revolutionary would really be like in an area and society like the one we've always seen in a galaxy far, far away. Nathan, what do you think? Mon Mothma, A plus character now, or still meh?
Yeah, and this goes back to your earlier point of, this expansion actually started in Rebels, so we got more of her story there, but we got even more in Andor, and I think that really made her, it took her from being a pretty good character to being one of the best characters in Star Wars. So
yeah. Derek?
I totally agree with this one.
How do you feel about the Moon Mother these days?
So obviously this opportunity for Genevieve O'Reilly to portray Mon Mothma, like I've already known she's been an important, where she's gotten a little bit more, especially with the deleted scenes, Revenge of the Sith. You got the Clone Wars, you got Rebels, to Nathan's point, you got a lot of stuff, but it also makes me upset because she is a cool character here and all this stuff, but then post Return of the Jedi, she becomes a typical bureaucrat again, and I despise her because she's leading the New Republic. And again, it's this whole, well, we shouldn't be down this road again where we have to worry about the Empire and, forming. It's like, no, you're stupid. Like, don't, you should be preparing. You've learned this already. What haven't you learned these past 15 years?
But
what?
those,
You mean people looking the other way while fascism rears its ugly head once again? No, that never.
That's what I'm saying. So,
but
anyways.
I think some of that can go back to how the Rebel Alliance was born. You've got neo-Republicans in the Rebel Alliance. The only thing holding the Rebel Alliance together is we all hate the Empire. Once the Empire is gone, they go back to, well, we think the Republic should just come back. Well, we think it should be a whole new government. Well, we're partisans and we don't really care as long as screw authority.
Guys, I have these articles of confederation. We should totally use them. Anyway, all right.
That's what I'm saying. So anyway, so it just makes me upset because yes, I like this character a lot, but then I also again hate her later on in her life when she falls from where she was at, just like Tarkin.
Which makes her a very well-rounded human character, and her species is human.
She lived too long to see herself become the villain.
That's right. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain, or in the case of Derek, you live long enough to make really bad choices. I used to love Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. Now I hate his guts. And I don't know if that's because he lived too long, or if
Well, again, yes, government, you should have 2 terms and that's it. So, but
yeah, that was what I was really going to say was term limits would have helped me never reach the point where I was so pissed off at Senator Graham. But anyway, thankfully,
so if they would have had term limits here, and Mon Mothma would have been able to become head of Republic because she served enough time beforehand. There you go.
All right, number 3, speaking of senators, Bail chose to, quote, go down swinging, a line that hits hard knowing what happens to him. This decision ensured his world would be the first destroyed by the Death Star, but it also led to the rebellion's ultimate victory. So we see here in Andor, in the finale, the very last episode of season 2, Bail says if he's going to fight the Empire, he wants to go down swinging. And Cassian says to him somewhat ruefully, but also in a bittersweet moment of camaraderie following the death of Luthen, he says to Bail, you and Luthen would have got along a lot better than you think. And he's right. They definitely would have. And so Also, it's fun to hear Bail Organa say, I want to go down swinging when his world famously has no weapons. We're a peaceful planet. We have no weapons. But yet Bail is all like, let's fight them. Come on. And,
Hey,
and then
for all
he's
you know,
got
they could have
those,
been building their own Death Star. Mm-hmm.
right. He's got those code cylinders on his coat. I think that's so cool. I missed Jimmy Smits, of course, but I loved the portrayal by Benjamin Bratt here of Bail Organa. I thought he did a great job. It didn't detract from me, but after the first minute or so, I didn't really think to myself, "Oh, that's not Bail Organa."
At
I'm
least
like,
he
no,
didn't wink
okay,
at the camera.
yeah, exactly.
Like
He didn't look
Rhodey.
at the camera and say,
Like
"I'm
God
here
damn.
now. Deal with it." Yeah, exactly. We're gonna put a lampshade on it by handing this lampshade to him. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know, Nathan. What do you think? Bail Organa go down swinging? Did that make you go ooh when you were watching that episode?
The point that actually made me go ooh was when he stayed in the Senate while Mon Mothma escaped. At that point, I thought, okay, this is probably actually why they went after Alderaan. Mon Mothma is already out of the Senate, so there's no point in going after Chandrila at this point. But yeah, we have Bail, and presumably, by the point of the final 3 episodes, Leia is an Imperial senator. So I think it was more of them staying in the Senate rather than this particular line of going down swinging. But staying in the Senate was part of going down swinging. So
yeah, he was fighting bureaucratically, as it were. Derek, what did you think when you heard Bale say this about I prefer to go down swinging? You're like, well,
it's kind of like, yeah, no. To me, it would have been really cool though if they had him like with some bodyguards, and one of the characters was obviously either a guy or a girl, and their last name would have been Dune. That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Because then
All right.
oh hey, there's a reason why Cara Dune did what she did later on, because her family, was actually part of the rebellion and was part of that, right?
Yeah.
So.
All right, number 2, we now know how much it costs just to get the Death Star plans. More people sacrificed themselves than we thought. So Luthen took his own life when the Empire found him. Clea barely made it off Coruscant. Cassian had to fight to make the Council listen, and so on and so forth. We all have that joke about many Bothans died to bring us these plans that Mon Mothma says about the Death Star 2 in Return of the Jedi. My favorite interpretation of that joke, of course, is Admiral Akbar saying, I sent Bothans to get me a coffee once. They all died. But that was
it
Death
was
Star.
a frappuccino. A trappuccino.
Yes, so that was Death Star 2, though. Now we know more about Death Star 1 and how much it cost to get the plans. Derek, what did you think about this? Is this expanding your lore for you?
I mean, it does and it doesn't, because at the end of the day, they still didn't know what to do with it, right? Like, it's like, oh, because at some point you would think somebody, because again, where are they building this giant planetary moon? And there's all this stuff that goes on. Again, there's all these things like who's building it, where's it going, who's putting it together. Like, at some point, something would have to get released, in my opinion, especially since we know like how stupid the Empire is, and people just leaving files around, unless if they're in Nathan's point, or again Deidre snooping. Either way,
I mean that there's still stupidity there.
Yes. So
yeah, there's still security problems there that if she could find it. Yeah.
We're clean on OPSEC.
So to me, really, it doesn't do anything, because really Rogue One is how the real sacrifice is to get to the Death Star plans, in a sense, right? Like, they didn't really get Death Star plans. All they found out was that the Death Star exists. So to me, this doesn't really mean anything else to get the plans, because the plans were really what happened in Rogue One. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the rebellion. But see, that's the rebellion, though.
You got to start the domino chain somewhere, though.
I just don't see the correlation, though, because at the end of the day, again, the sacrifices they did was for the rebellion. It wasn't for the Death Star plans, is what I'm saying. To me, that's where it's different, because the Death Star plans was what Cassian and Jyn did, and the sacrifices they made to get the plans to beat the Death Star. Because all these guys did at the end of the day was to form the alliance, which is huge sacrifice. So that's where I'm saying it was more about going back to the original question that we talked about, the Rebel Alliance. All the sacrifices these guys did was to get the Rebel Alliance to be where they were at the time, to then go get the Death Star plans. Because again, all Luthen and Clea had was, oh, they're building some massive weapon. That's all. It wasn't plans though. It was just, oh, they're building a Death Star, right? That's all.
Yeah, I think I agree with Derek. Really, we get the plans in Rogue One. It didn't matter what information they got in Andor. Now, what the information they got in Andor did do was corroborate the plans. That hey, this is an actual thing. We now have data from two different sources, or under my theory, one source, but through two different channels. And then they're more sure that these are real. That can explain why they acted upon the plans in Rogue One, although they kind of didn't want to even then. But I agree that the show is more about building the rebellion more so than these specific plans.
Yeah. All right. And number one, the award ceremony in A New Hope is bittersweet now. So many rebels died to create this happy ending. Seeing just how many characters suffered and died to give Luke Skywalker his chance to destroy the Death Star makes it a bit sad. Luke and Han absolutely deserve credit for their actions, but Andor reveals how many other rebels deserve to be on that stage getting a medal. Or Wookiees, I might add. But yeah, I think this is correct too. Although I've always found the award ceremony in A New Hope bittersweet, even the first time I ever saw the film, because we just watched a bunch of brave rebels get blown to pieces during the Battle of Yavin, to say nothing of what had happened earlier on in the film with all the Sand People, Luke's aunt and uncle, so on and so forth.
Yeah, rest in peace, Aunt Beru and Uncle.
Exactly. Yeah. But the writer is correct here in that it adds another layer to it, because we can think about how Cassian and Baze and Chirrut and all those guys didn't get a medal, even posthumously, for being a part of Rogue One, the team that went to Scarif. And then presumably we don't see any kind of medals for Blue Squadron and all those guys that sacrificed themselves at the Battle of Scarif, or even the eggshell troopers that were Leia's bodyguards on the Tentive E4. It's those people, of course, we know about in the original A New Hope. And he's right. Rourke is correct here that it does add another layer of bittersweetness to it. And I appreciate that. But I hope that we're kind of reaching the end of Disney Lucasfilm era, mining the original trilogy for more storylines. Now, I don't think that we are. I'm hoping
we
that
need what happens between A New Hope and Hoth. We need to go with there. Yeah. We need Shadows of the Empire. We need that.
We're going to get a story about all those little Bothans, the mini Bothans who died.
We're going to get Heir to the Empire, which happens after, to be fair, but it's still within the original timeline.
In fairness to Disney and the crew right now, Lucasfilm did all these stories back at the turn of the millennium too. We had tons of stories between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back in the original Marvel Comics run of Star Wars comics, to say nothing of the one that started in like 2015.
Going all the way back to Splinter of the Mind's Eye, before Empire Strikes Back even came out.
Right. Yep. So anyway, Nathan, what do you think? Is it more bittersweet at the Yavin throne room?
Yeah, I would say more bittersweet. I agree with you that it was bittersweet even in the original, because only 4 ships came back from the Battle of Yavin, and that's counting the Millennium Falcon. There was a Y-wing and 2 X-wings, and they sent up whole squadrons. So the amount of death, particularly with Biggs dying. So Luke's childhood friend dies. So that it was already a bittersweet moment there. This is something that I really liked about The Last Jedi, going all the way to episode 8, when Poe takes down the big ship. He's like, oh yeah, this is a fleet killer, and we were able to take it out. Isn't that awesome? Yay, go us. Leia's over there watching as all of these ships blink out on her console, and she reminds him, okay, yeah, it's great that you took that out, but don't forget about the cost that all these people died to do that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Derek, what do you think? Does this change the way you watch the medal ceremony at the end of episode 4?
Well, and also because the thing is, though, the medal ceremony, it makes sense in a vacuum, but the medal ceremony doesn't really make sense going forward, because the Empire's not done, right? Like, the way A New Hope is done is you think, oh, they blew up the massive Death Star. that's the end of it, right? But then you get into Empire Strikes Back, and it's like, okay, they got a medal for what then? Like, and it wasn't like a medal for like a promotion, like, oh hey, now you've made, Commander Luke, right? Or you made General Solo, or whatever, right? It's like a big hunking gold medal like they've done the Olympics, you know what I'm saying?
I always thought it was like a campaign medal, like you've won a big important battle, which we do in the contemporary American Army.
I mean, that's fine, but usually you get a medal you can wear on your fruit
uniform.
Salad. Yeah, you can wear it on your uniform, right?
Well, these are ones made for uniforms, just not for humans. They came from
and
another
the one
planet.
that didn't get one, because the only one that would have been able to wear it is the Wookiee, and he didn't get one.
Well, but he doesn't have clothes, so you have nowhere to pin it.
He has the beret.
But now,
he could have added a little badge there, like a Boy Scout.
But now, see, when you win a medal in the United States Armed Forces today, you get the big one that goes around your neck, but then you get a smaller one that goes on your fruit salad. Like if you have a Purple Heart, you've got that big picture of George Washington on the big medal. But when you put it on your dress uniform, you have like a purple ribbon with the forgive me, any military officers listening to the podcast, I don't know precisely what the bar looks like, but the bar that goes on your chest for your uniform is a modified version of the big like Olympic medal like you were talking about.
Well, clearly Luke and Han don't care because they never seen wearing.
They don't wear uniforms.
Right.
They don't bother to wear uniforms.
So what's the point then? So anyways, like I said, I've never had a problem with it, other than, like I said, I feel bad that Chewie never got one. I thought that was pretty, lame.
He got one off screen, but that's a whole nother
or he
story.
gets Hans after Hans dies or Leia dies or whatever, with those prequel or sequel trilogy movies. But anyways, all I'm saying is like, but no, it definitely adds to the point of all the things. Like it basically shows you all the things. It just, at some point you would hope after Return of the Jedi that they would build a memorial with all the people's names on it. And we don't have that yet, right? Like you would think, like we've done with World War II and all those things, all the soldiers honored, or anything from the Civil War and some of those things that they've done at the graveyards and gravestones, right? So we don't have anything like that technically in the Star Wars universe that I know of. Obviously, you guys, might be a little bit more indulged with some of the more classic series of the comics, but we never got that. So maybe at some point they could do that. And then you could reference, because like you would think at some point there would be like between Return of the Jedi and what we're getting with the First Order, even with the First Order, you'd still think on Coruscant, they would give something, right? Like so that the Torah guide can go like, oh, here's, Luthen. He's the one who started the rebellion. Like it should be his name first, right? In essence. And then followed by Clea and Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, blah, blah, blah. Like, anyways, that's to me is what it means more. But yes, obviously it does impact because you've got names and faces to the people that sacrificed their lives to basically just, luckily the Force was there because it was so convenient that all the things that happened in Andor, Rogue One, and A New Hope line up, because otherwise and in theory the Clone Wars, and prior to that because you have everything else with Obi-Wan. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we do get a cool monument a la the Wall of Names from the Vietnam War in some future story, we'll talk about it. Although I think we got kind of a Clone Wars version of that, didn't we, Nathan? Isn't there an episode? What am I thinking of? There's an episode where there was like a monument with a bunch of names on it, and it was for clones.
Yes, it was in Bad Batch.
Bad Batch, yeah.
But that's the Clone Wars, though.
It's not the Galactic Civil War. You're right about that. Yeah, totally. All right. Anyways, well, speaking of stuff that happened in previous Star Wars Marvel comics, we are going to do Derek's favorite part of the show, which is the merchandise segment. I don't have a Star Wars shirt on this week, as people have noticed, because I'm cleverly camouflaged. But seriously,
didn't see that.
Yeah, exactly. I actually have a figure that I got a few years ago that I wanted to use as my merch for tonight, and it is Jackson, the correct scale Black Series Jackson figure that I love so much, because I knew that we would be talking a bit about Star Wars Marvel comics in tonight's episode of the podcast, because like we said, we expect some of these stories to be some of these characters to continue on in stories in Star Wars Marvel comics. So stay tuned for that, and check out the cool action figures that are often inspired by those comics. But I know that you guys have some merch to talk about as well. Nathan, Your shirt is weird.
My shirt is weird.
What's going on here?
He's going to be a chef.
Yeah, this is not a chef shirt, although I totally understand why you might think this. This is the Han Solo shirt.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah.
Okay. For a minute there, I thought it was some weird, like, negative version, reverse universe of Luke's outfit from Return of the Jedi at the throne room, where he opens it and it's all black and reveals white. And I thought maybe it was going to be all white and reveal black, but no.
No, it's just straight up Han Solo shirt. But yeah, I realized in wearing this shirt that it is pretty much the same as Luke's shirt in how it folds down. Although you can actually button this up and have it just be a white shirt. But I gotta tell you, there's buttons all the way up here. This is not the easiest shirt to put on and take off. So,
well, you see, it is a very avant-garde design from this guy who's very famous for his avant-garde designs. His name is Valerian Sky. He's all the rage on Dorman this season.
So I did get this from her universe with the May the 4th sale. I will say it is slightly smaller than I was expecting. I am down to an extra large. So I was an XXL. It fits around. It's actually shorter than I was expecting. So it it only comes down to just barely below my belt. I'm not sure how often I'm going to wear this shirt, but it is nice to have.
Yeah, my new headcanon is that entire neckline situation that folds down and has the collary thing there is a Valerian Sky original, which is why Luke was wearing it, and so is Han.
Yeah, and the collar is a little odd too. This section comes out and buttons here. Mm-hmm. It's just it's a weird shirt.
It's quintessential 70s, a Nehru jacket cut for your collar there, but not actually a Nehru jacket, which I think is really funny for people who were alive long enough to pay attention to that in Star Wars fashion. But yes, Valerian Sky original.
It's definitely something I'll wear to conventions, and there will be people who go, "Oh, I know what that is," and I'll be like, "Cool, you and I can be friends."
Yeah, awesome, Derek. What do you got?
So, obviously, I'm wearing my not today Star Wars shirt because it's a Sunday. But no, I'm going to be as I mentioned, I got to play Star Wars Legion yesterday, which was great because it's been a while since I got to play it with some friends, but was able to go over a friend's house. I played the Clone Troopers. Went up 5-0 first, but I got to play a little bit, so I got the cards that go with it. So I'll show it to the folks on YouTube, which was my command hand.
Ooh.
I was playing. So because some of these got redone a little bit with the new rules and stuff. So this one was really good. Lead from the front, and where it goes from. Tactical planning, I played on turn 1 just because it's not really the greatest of cards, but it gives me for either 2 specials or a support units, which are really nice. Leader of the 501st was nice because it's a permanent, and it gives any of your troopers close to Anakin or Captain Rex Indomitable. But the problem was we never got that far, so I don't know if I would include it again in my next time. And then I was doing with my commander because I, again, wanted to make thematic because the new Ahsoka Padawan commander came out where you could actually use her as an upgrade to a unit, infantry unit or specials unit, which was nice. So I was able to play with a main character because you can't really play in recon only one commander. So I was playing Captain Rex. So I was doing that. And so his command cards I was playing was Call Me Captain. This one was pretty good. This one I was able to use in turn round 3 and was really good, except my dice sucked. So I didn't really get to do much with that. But it did allow me to add a bunch of red dice, which was really good. Take That Clankers. I probably could have played this at one point, but I didn't get a chance to. And then We're Not Reprogrammed, which is nice to give your stuff inspired too with Captain Rex to give some inspiration. But I, again, didn't get a chance to play that just because I knew after essentially round 4, I had lost. So we didn't even go into round 5. So, but I will say, though, playing at least in Recon Captain Rex wasn't that great of a commander unit. Unfortunately, he's got some nice tricks, but I think he's a little too expensive for what he brings to the table. Specifically, those command cards, as I mentioned, he's got one good one, but the other two are kind of lackluster, especially the way they shortened the game a bit too now. So I would recommend not taking Captain Rex in a recon. Probably I will play him in a full version though, because I think then I can play Anakin as the main character or main commander, and then I can actually play the full Ahsoka, which is what I want to do because she's got the associate, so she doesn't count as the third or even another commander because of the associate keyword. So, anyways, that was enough on that one.
Yeah, I know things have changed since I was playing Legion a lot, but when I was playing Legion a lot and playing Republic, the main draw to using Clone Captain Rex was he was cheap.
Yeah.
Compared to any of the other leaders, because the other leaders were Obi-Wan and Anakin. They were Jedi who cost like 200 points, and
which
Rex.
They got reduced. Captain Rex actually went up 5 points instead of 90. He's now 95.
Yeah, see, in that time he was 90. So it basically, if you wanted to do what I wanted to do and have maximum number of clones, you go with Rex and don't worry about bringing Jedi.
Yeah, no, I like Rex. Like I said, I'll still use him just to keep the 501st because you either have to play Anakin, Captain Rex, the General Clone Commander, and now you can add the Ahsoka Padawan Commander as a commander for it. But like I said, with the associate Anakin Skywalker on her, you can play her if you have Anakin in there. So I could still play Anakin and Captain Rex as my two commanders, and the Ahsoka can play as the because she doesn't count towards your that unit cap then. So you could still play her as essentially a third commander.
Cool. Well, I'm sure you guys can hear us discussing even more Star Wars Legion stuff, and perhaps even the individual-based version of the game where you operate individual models instead of squads. I want to give that a try sometime soon, which is now an option in the new rules from Atomic Mass Games. But we'll talk about that on a future episode because this episode is really getting long in the tooth. So let me just tell everybody out there to please hit us up between shows to let us know what we can do to make this podcast more enjoyable for you. We will be taking a bit of a break now that Andor is over, and we'll come back later this summer to discuss a few of the other Star Wars things that are going on, because these days we have hardly any downtime from the galaxy far, far away. And whatever we talk about, we want to remind you all to please respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.